This week, we welcome George Finney, Chief Security Officer at Southern Methodist University, to discuss the 9 cybersecurity habits. In the Leadership and Communications section, the importance of culture in digital transformation. 4 ways to keep cybersecurity conversation going after the crisis has passed. 8 new roles today's security team needs, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. We're proud to announce Cso Stories, a new podcast series in partnership with Cybersecurity Collaborative and Cyber Reason. Cso Stories features the candid perspectives and experiences of frontline senior security executives and dives deep into timely security topics. Cso Stories is hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Cybersecurity Collaborative, and Sam Curry, Chief Product and Security Officer at Cyber Reason. Listen weekly as they speak with extraordinary CISOs by visiting securityweekly.com/CSP.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 209, recorded March 15th, 2021. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in a very snowy Colorado. Yes, I survived the blizzard of 2021. Joining me from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island are my 2 co-hosts today, Mr. Paul Asadorian and Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Hey, Matt, start calling you snowshoes.
That's it. Good to be here. And this is, St. Patrick's Day week, so I broke out the green cigar, the Candela wrapper.
Nice. I'll stick with the 9-year-old Padron.
Yeah, you do. Should not smoke anything else but that.
Beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I am the snow thrower, not the snow shoer, just so you know.
How did you get through the 19 inches of snow? You needed snowshoes.
No, I have a really big snow thrower, and it took a long time. Do you want to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly? Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher or our YouTube channel, sign up for our mailing list, and join our Discord server. Our next live webcast will be on March 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern, where you will listen to learn how to prepare Linux hosts for unexpected threats. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they are available for your viewing pleasure at securityweekly.com/on-demand. George Finney is a Chief Information Security Officer that believes that people are the key to solving our cybersecurity challenges. George is the best-selling author of several cybersecurity books, including the award-winning book, Well Aware, Master the 9 Cybersecurity Habits to Protect Your Future. George has worked in cybersecurity for over 20 years and has helped startups, global telecommunications firms, and nonprofits improve their security posture. George, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. This is an honor to be here.
We're going to talk about the book. And I always like to figure out, what motivates somebody to write a book? Why the book? What kind of motivated that thought process for you?
It's a sickness. People don't tell you when you start writing as a hobby that you're going to spend hours and hours alone in a cave. I just have this passion for writing. I've always been a writer. I think I got the bug when I was in the 3rd grade writing a story for Halloween. I've written fiction, books and other projects over the years, but I just decided to turn my passion back to cybersecurity and see if I could make a difference with going writing a few years ago. And it's really seeming to resonate with people, which is just so gratifying.
That's great. So this is not a fiction book, I assume. This is a fact book. So What's the premise behind the 9 cybersecurity habits?
So, I had this idea, we in cybersecurity, we do a good job, building up new practitioners, but reaching outside of the security industry, we need to be able to translate, whatever it is we're saying into the business world. And if you're a business professional, whether you're in sales or accounting or you're an executive, you've got a whole litany of professional development books that you could read, whether it's Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, whether it's Good to Great, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. All of those books. There's not one about cybersecurity, right? There's not one that's translated into a non-technical speak that people can take and move on. And I really decided to focus on habits because the research suggests that 40 to 50% of all human behavior is based on habits. So if we're going to move the needle and help get other folks engaged in cybersecurity and help them change and improve, we've got to start, I think, with habits. And as I did my research, I kind of figured out, oh my gosh, I think there are actually 9 cybersecurity habits. True story. I started out 4 years ago. I thought there were 8, and I changed them around as I kind of did my research. But I think that's how we can really, I think, best improve is to focus on the things we do every day.
So I'm curious how you got to 8 to 9, not 7, which is Stephen Covey's book, is the 7 Habits of highly effective people. How did you, as you're doing your research, you said you started with 8, you end up with 9. How do you determine whether it's a habit or it's not a habit?
Yeah, so I kind of reverse engineered it, and I took all of the tips and tricks we give people, and I've got this gigantic spreadsheet with all of the hundreds of tips and tricks that I've kind of accumulated over the years. And I thought, okay, well, if I was going to organize them, how would I do it? And I was actually inspired by the kill chain, and I thought, well, if they're habits, maybe some of these habits would disrupt different parts of the kill chain. So I started trying to group them and figure out, well, what's the best groupings, which makes sense. But where I went from there is I started doing a lot of research into psychology and neuroscience and behavioral economics or human learning theory. And as I went through, I kind of validated the distillations of all the groups by looking at real research that talks about, vigilance is really influenced by a specific part of the brain, the amygdala, and here are techniques that already exist in other fields or other parts of psychology, and here's how we can take that, incorporate it into cybersecurity to make a difference. And then I did more research to test whether those things would work or not in a corporate environment.
Yeah, so I'm curious now because habits are interesting, right? Some people have them natively, some people have to learn them. Have you looked at, we'll go through the 9 here in a minute because I want to go through some of these, but is it people that are in security like naturally have a good subset of these habits, or is everything learned or can be learned?
I think certain ones, appeal to cybersecurity professionals. I think in particular, like skepticism. Those kinds of habits. Deception might be another one. Where we understand them kind of natively. We're more comfortable doing them in our day-to-day jobs, whereas in other fields, maybe those aren't practiced as well. You don't necessarily learn them. Kind of on the job, you might experience them in different aspects, but that's not something you're expected to do. But I think other fields like sales, they teach you mirroring, which is one of the other habits. So it's not necessarily that the habits are native to cybersecurity, but I think we can leverage those habits to make ourselves more secure.
I would think it depends on the person, right? I mean, some people are going to have strengths in certain areas, others won't. And you just learn to kind of reinforce those strengths, right? Because at the end of the day, you could have a level of strength in secrecy, which is one of them, right? But how do you take that and translate that into a business environment? right? So that way, as a business peer, right, as a colleague, they're not you want people to trust you, right? So if you deploy secrecy in the wrong way, in the wrong strategy, it's going to be polar opposite effect, polar opposite outcome, right? So it's how do you take that and bring that into the business world? Because ultimately the goal is to align security to the business.
Well, secrecy is all about context.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we talk about risk classification. That's a part of the habit of secrecy is doing that, but then also threat modeling against your risks, understanding how to connect those two. What I'm actually working on now, which is a little bit future looking, I'll probably release this sometime in April, but I'm building a cybersecurity personality quiz. So similar to like a Myers-Briggs, the first 4 habits are really internal. Those are things that you do, while you're alone, working or thinking about things. The final 5 habits are all external, so culture or community. All of those things involve multiple people. So I think that you can have a strength, in your internal habits as well as strengths in your external habits. And I think there are archetypes that those categories naturally kind of bring out. But I think what those other personality profiles like Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder or Predictive Index, they focus on building your identity, right? And that's how you get stronger, is building upon your strengths, not necessarily covering up your weaknesses. And I think that's one of the ways that we can make a difference in cybersecurity with the business is helping people build the identity that I'm a person that values security. I can make a difference, instead of sending the message that I'm the weakest link and I'm always going to be a failure and I just need technology to do it for me.
Yeah, I love the idea of a strengths finder focused on cybersecurity. I think that'd be really, really cool. I did that from a business perspective, a leadership perspective, but to be able to have something like that to share with your team, to even do yourself as a security leader, I think that'd be very interesting. Yeah.
Well, I'm a huge proponent of treating cybersecurity more like healthcare in the different roles and types of jobs and careers that we have. Because I think today it's kind of looked at as all just one big bucket of cybersecurity. And I'm like, no, like there's really kind of the equivalence of what we would see as doctors and technicians and all these other roles, that we have. I think it's become a much, cybersecurity 20 plus years ago, it might have been, like I'm going to hire a hacker, right? Or someone to a wizard to break my stuff and help me secure my stuff. Like we've evolved so far past that.
Big time. And at the end of the day, we talk about this on the show all the time, developing aptitude or identifying aptitude, right? So I think having that level of a strengths finder would be able to show the aptitude that people have, so that way you can align them, the right people on the right seat, in the right seat, on the right bus. Right?
Yes.
We talk about that all the time. So how do you put those folks in the right seat on the bus? Aptitude. You got
I think you want to have a team that has complementary strengths as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
Diverse team. Yeah. 100%.
And being able to measure that and find the right people and making sure different projects might require different sets of strengths. So selecting out for that, I think could be huge.
No, yeah, that's a big deal. It allows a CISO to look at their team holistically and see where gaps are, right, and then strategically fill
George,
those gaps.
I really like this because, and especially as I go through kind of the exercise, it just as like a small example, people were posting their vaccine cards online,
right,
and I advised my Facebook followers not to do that. But then if I take that and I kind of line it up to your cybersecurity habits, like for cybersecurity professionals, many of us, it would come natural, right? But you can hit on all those things, like what information should be secret, and protecting that information as part of vigilance, me being skeptical about what someone might do with that information and use it in harm. But then also, how do you communicate, to your other 5? How do I develop a culture where I shouldn't have to send that email to people in my organization? Like they should just know, right?
Right.
So it was really
and now you're creating a community of people who want to pay attention to what you're saying and learn from you and advise other people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think with the way we do security awareness, today it's very technology focused, right? It's essentially giving them fish instead of teaching them the fish, right? So here's how to set a mobile pin on my phone, and the next time they have to come back to you to say, okay, well, I've got this new technology, help me figure out how to. Well, no, if instead we started with kind of more of a framework to say, here's the big picture. Now, each new thing that you learn fits into that that overall framework and helps you learn faster and repeat that behavior long term.
I couldn't agree more, right? I mean, over the course of time with my companies that I've worked for, we've done everything from, the check in the box LMS training, and none of it worked, right? The most successful cyber awareness campaigns and programs that I've been part of are the ones that align it to their home, align it to their personal life, right? And it's that education that sometimes you look at it and you say, what does this have to do with work? But it's creating a mindset of paying attention to the things you want them to pay attention, because it translates automatically.
Because the lesson should be, one lesson should be, what information do you share publicly on the internet? And people are smart. Like they're going to figure that out, given the right examples and create the right mindset for doing that. I mean, the lesson really shouldn't be don't post your vaccine card online. It should be you moving forward in the future, what information are you sharing publicly?
Success is you look at that card and say, here are all the things I should not be sharing.
And go, nope.
I think some of the research on habits specifically, talk about this habit loop. So there's a prompt that gets you to do a behavior, then there's the behavior itself, followed by like a reward that gives you some kind of dopamine fix to get you to repeat that loop again. That's how you build and create habits. But I think the parts that's missing is we understand the behaviors, but we don't. If we say don't write your password down, or don't show your vaccine card, that's not creating the loop for people, right? So that makes it their problem to go figure out how to build that habit loop. So instead, if we started with there's this concept of recipes that BJ Fogg, he's a professor at Stanford, he wrote the book called Tiny Habits. To build a recipe for that habit loop, so that every time I do X, if I go on social media or if I finish brushing my teeth, here's the behavior that's going to come afterwards, and here's a reason to get me to do it again. I think we ought to be thinking, holistically about the person and helping them get to that place where they're building habits, rather than just telling them what to do and then berating them for failing to do that, because that's the position we're in today, right?
Yeah. And I've always used storytelling, right? Yeah. People can remember quick stories, and if you can have a story that's impactful enough, people will remember the story that they read or were told or watched a video on, and it'll translate, because that'll trigger something. When something happens that was in that story, it'll actually trigger a response, trigger a habit, like you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, good instructors have stories. Great instructors can really teach the entire class in stories, right? Really, even if something mundane is like, here are the TCP/IP headers, right? How do you have stories, right? Great instructors will
tell the story. It's all about storytelling.
Super hard. Yep.
So I want to get into the 9, because we've hit on a number of them, but there's a couple I really want to double click on a little bit. So our internal ones: literacy, skepticism, vigilance, and secrecy. Now, I get the skepticism, vigilance, and secrecy. That's just the way I'm wired. I'm curious about literacy. Is literacy only about security literacy, or is it about security and its impact on business? Is it more of a risk literacy? When you say literacy, kind of explain that one a little bit, because, as the role of the CISO has shifted from more of a technical operational role more to a business strategic role, I'm assuming the literacy of that role also has to change.
Totally. I didn't want to start out with a definition of literacy that was prescriptive, right? You have to know X to be literate. There's this concept of the curse of knowledge, where, when you try and teach people, right, you don't know what they know, or you don't know what they don't know. And it's very hard to connect with someone about that. So I've started with a broader definition, which is, the literal definition of literacy is that you can read the words on a page, right? And you use that foundation in order to build meaning, to build understanding, right? And so, the definition of what cybersecurity literacy means for you will vary, whether you're a single mom, taking care of some kids, or whether you're a CEO, working, on a high-tech startup, right? Very different needs, but I think all of them can have this baseline of cybersecurity literacy. which does include some risk, right? You have to understand, what technology you use, where your data is. You have to understand the risks to that data. But you also, need to have a pipeline of information coming to you, because, technology and cybersecurity are both, evolving rapidly. You need a way of getting information to you that's relevant, whether that's, your mommy blog, whether that's, your National Association of Corporate Board Directors, right? There has to be conversations in all of those areas that are relevant to cybersecurity, because it impacts all of us, right? The Girl Scouts have a cybersecurity merit badge program to help build literacy for young girls, right? And I think, again, it's going to evolve for you through your whole life. But my pitch is that, today, when you look at the top, say 10 or 20 MBA programs in the country, none of them offer a single cybersecurity class. So, we're looking at CEOs getting fired today for not understanding cybersecurity, not getting it right, blaming the interns. And, I think knowing that MBAs today still aren't being trained on it, that means, in 10 or 20 years, when those MBAs become CEOs, we're still not going to be getting it unless we change the way we're talking about cybersecurity.
Yeah. And I think it makes sense. I mean, the key line that I pull out of the description is understanding your environment, right? And as a security leader within your organization, you need to know the business, right? And that's aligning with the business units, aligning with the CEO, aligning with the board of directors, understanding your environment from a cultural perspective to a process perspective, data governance, the technologies that are involved in it. It's really understanding soup to nuts. If you're going to be a cybersecurity leader within a business, you have to understand it. Hey, by the way, educate those MBAs who just came out who never had a cybersecurity class. Become that next class that they have to take once they graduated, right? Give them a class in cybersecurity, give them a class in risk, because they need it. We talk about higher ed not teaching cybersecurity the right way, right? This is part of the problem. MBAs at this point in time should have lessons in risk management, lessons in cybersecurity. They have to.
Agreed.
Sorry, that's my soapbox.
No, yeah, I love when you do it, because we talk about this a bunch. Now I want to go to the external habits. We get culture, diligence, and community. I mean, we're rooted in it in this show, by the way. But that's just the way we are. I want to double click on mirroring and deception, because I think those are two interesting habits not many people think about. So let's start with mirroring and this concept of understanding what your profile looks like to the external person. That goes a little bit back to this concept of safety and embedding kind of those safety habits at home. Mirroring is a very interesting habit to me.
So for mirroring, I think, when I'm talking to a cybersecurity audience, I always want to clarify, like, social engineers talk about mirroring, or salespeople will talk about mirroring to kind of build some fake, rapport. That's not the kind of mirroring I'm talking about. We actually have in our brains these interesting things called mirror neurons. So we're actually wired to be able to understand other human beings' intentions or their thoughts by the process of these mirror neurons firing, right? So if you've ever seen like a pro athlete get injured, and you physically felt that's your mirror neurons firing. So the researchers that discovered mirror neurons say that we're wired for empathy. We're wired to be able to learn from people around us. And taking that a little further back to cybersecurity, when we do a penetration test, essentially we're using the habit of mirroring to help our organization understand from an external perspective what we look like, whether we're leaking data, whether we have open holes or vulnerabilities that are out there. But even the habit of Googling your own name, or looking at your social media profile from an anonymous perspective, all of those things are kind of representations of the habit of mirroring, and you need to be able to see yourself from that external perspective in order to be able to get more secure. But it's something that we naturally also have blind spots. We're wired not to look for additional information to find those blind spots. So just like when you're teaching a kid to drive, you have to like physically show them like, no, there's this gigantic blind spot behind you where your mirrors don't cover. And for me, when I was learning to drive, the instructor actually physically had to walk back there and say, can you see me now? Can you see me now? Nope. Oh, okay. You're definitely going to look from now on. And I think that's what we need to do to help people kind of develop that habit of mirroring, because it's not something that comes naturally. We've got to work to overcome those blind spots.
And now, George, can you take the polar opposite approach? Because I find myself doing this a lot with my colleagues, right? Other business unit leaders. I put myself in their shoes and I answer the questions based on how I think they would answer, to the point where we'll have executive teams on a conference call with our customers. And, obviously security is front and center. They're asking, questions about security and our risk posture and vendor risk type stuff. But there'll be questions they'll ask about business units. And I'll answer the question in the shoes of, let's say, the senior vice president of managed services. And we'll get off the call and I'll have my colleague call me and say, I love being on calls with you because you know exactly what I'm thinking. You know exactly what I'm feeling. You know exactly how I respond. And basically what I'm doing is I'm mirroring my colleague. Like, I know him well enough. I know the business well enough. I know the responses well enough that I can actually mirror that reaction or that answer or that emotion and do it for my business colleagues. And they appreciate that, right? They realize how aligned you are with the business, their intentions, their outcomes, what they want to achieve. And I think that's that's something incredible that cybersecurity leaders can be doing for their businesses. And to be honest with you, for the culture of cybersecurity within an organization, if you can be doing that, it just promotes that level of trust, right?
I think Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference, was one of the best works on that.
I love Chris Voss's book, by the way. But yeah,
I knew you dig that, George. I'm sure you've read it. I was like, you have to.
Mirroring is definitely a two-way street, right? You can be a mirror for others, and others can be a mirror for you. And just making sure that you're not alone. You're not stuck inside your head. I think that's where we drive ourselves a little crazy, and we try and think about what other people are doing. And we create these crazy narratives when maybe there are other experiences. If we could put ourselves in their shoes, that's where we create real connection, and that's where all of the external cybersecurity habits kind of come to life.
If there's ever an addendum to the book, one of the things that I learned really early on in my career is the difference between selfishness and selflessness. And one of the habits I created was selflessness, because I'm here to provide a service to my organization and my colleagues in the business and business units. And my goal is to be selfless in that approach and those outcomes, right? So for me, that's a big habit that I've always put forward, is selflessness, right? That allows me to put myself in my colleagues' shoes, because I'm not thinking about me at all, right? I'm thinking about how that business unit leader is going to react, feel, right? Respond.
Totally. I mean, and I'm honestly, when I have interactions with some of the business leaders, in my organization, I mean, that may be the only time we have a conversation, is when something's gone wrong. It's a stressful time.
Yeah.
So, I have to tailor my approach to make sure that I'm not shutting them down, that I'm not, changing their perspective in such a way that's going to prevent us from being able to work together. So again, you got to take stress out of it. You've got to build those relationships, hopefully before you have those conversations.
The last one I want to hit on is deception, because we think of deception as a technology or a technique, not a habit. So I want you to explain this one, because it's a very interesting one on your list.
So, I don't know how this worked out, but I've got all my Decepticons behind me. I don't know if you but I think about deception's a hard one. I think it's one of the hardest habits to master, because we're wired to not want to deceive. There's actually, I found there's some psychology effects where you can actually show that it has a detrimental effect on people's performance and behavior. However, deception is one of the key techniques you can use to disrupt attackers, right? So, thinking back to honeypots or using fake password challenge questions, right? Teaching people to lie when they're talking to computers, when they don't need to give their real information, they don't need to give their real birth date. That I think that's an incredibly important way of interacting with technology, because we know people are going to know what city you were born in, and use that to compromise your account. They don't necessarily need to know your password anymore. So building that into your process, we do that here at our university. It turns out that parents really want to know what students' grades are. And as it turns out, privacy laws say students are adults, and they have to sign off on their parents getting those grades, and some of them don't. And we get calls from parents pretending to be the student in order to get those grades. So we have some processes. We essentially ask trick questions that only the students who are taking those classes would know. And we catch a few parents calling in, and that we try to avoid embarrassing anyone, but I think having those kinds of challenge questions or trick questions, I do that in interviews, to find out whether your stuff, or whether your resume is kind of fluff. And I think that's important to kind of disrupt the any kind of deception from the bad guys that are coming in.
It's kind of the opposite of trust, because we inherently as humans trust people. And so by having a deception habit, it makes us think, I guess, a little bit before we trust somebody to give them information that maybe we shouldn't. So that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah. And ultimately, I mean, you can use it to build trust as well, because I think, again, from an executive level, you're actually teaching your colleagues how to use deception, right? So it's not like you're deceiving them, right? You're teaching them how to use deception to protect themselves, to protect their family, to protect their employees, right?
Mm-hmm. We have an executive named Chris at our organization, and occasionally people will call and say, "Hey, I went to college with Chris. He and I are best friends. Go ahead and put me through." And actually, Chris is a woman, right? That's a great way, and her receptionist knows when they get a call and they use he.
Yep.
They don't know the executive, right? And that's. Again, I think it's something that anybody can do. It's not just a cybersecurity person doing it.
Right.
It's really, it's such a great tool to prevent, weird things from happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. George, you said you were working on a questionnaire, kind of an analysis of which of these habits do you have. I don't think it's out yet, but I mean, how do people start to look at these 9 habits and figure out, okay, now what? What should I do with this information? How do I assess myself? How do I develop some of these habits?
So I'm the personality assessment will be, I think, ready early April. I've also built a Udemy course that will also become available beginning of April. And really, I think it's about creating. If each habit is kind of a recipe that you customize for your life the way you live it, I would say you build a cookbook of recipes that you're going to work on. You start with your strengths, and think about what it is that you're going to try to accomplish. I think if you're going to be up for a promotion, or you're going to go out for a new job in the next 6 months to a year. I think now is the best time to start kind of building cybersecurity into your career path. Even if you're a non-technical, salesperson or accountant, I think that's going to make the difference for a lot of future leadership positions, is being able to show you understand cybersecurity today. But I think, I forget who said it earlier, but protecting your family, thinking about how you can protect your kids online better, making sure that, they're staying safe, whether they've got a cell phone and you're making sure they're using it appropriately, making sure they're not going to inappropriate websites. I think all of those things. We live in such a technology-driven world today. Kids today are digital natives, but for the rest of us, we didn't necessarily grow up with technology. So we're trying to have to go back and relearn some things. And these are all new habits for us. We've got to kind of develop some of those habits from scratch. So really, the book is out there today. And there'll be more resources coming to help kind of build those habits, but everyone's different, and different habits might work for you. Different rewards might help reinforce them in different ways. So I just want to work with people to be kind of more like a coach, right? You have wellness coaches or leadership coaches. We don't necessarily have cybersecurity coaches out there, and I think that's something that we ought to do more of.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Recipes are important. Mm-hmm. It's how I get my steak marinades, and I tweak them, and I, get them the way I like them, just like Paul does with his barbecue. So, mm-hmm. we like recipes. George, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you, guys. It's awesome being here.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.